What is the truth of death? Not just the moment when the heart stops beating, but the deeper truth hidden beneath it, the kind of truth that changes how we see life itself. This is the question at the heart of the Tibetan Book of the Dead, also known as the Bardo Thodol. And it's the question that drives this entire journey. This article, and the video you're about to experience, is not just about death. It's about what death reveals, what it strips away, and what it can teach us if we are ready to listen. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is unlike anything else in the world. It's not a book of fear, punishment, or reward. It doesn't promise heaven or threaten hell. Instead, it gives us a map, a guide through what happens after we die. And that map, surprisingly, is just as much for the living as it is for the dead. Written in the 14th century and passed down through Tibetan Buddhist tradition, the Bardo Thodol was meant to be read aloud to someone who had just died. It's spoken directly to the consciousness of the person who has left their body but has not yet moved on. It walks them through a series of experiences called bardos that unfold between death and rebirth. But here's what makes it truly powerful. The text insists that everything the person sees after death is coming from their own mind. The peaceful gods, the terrifying demons, the lights, the sounds, the visions. They aren't out there. They are reflections of the person's own thoughts, habits, emotions, and karma. Even after death, we don't escape ourselves. We meet ourselves face to face. And this is where the deeper truth begins. Death, according to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, is not the end. It's a transition, a transformation, a chance to wake up. And if we can recognize what's happening, if we can stay aware and not panic, we can be free from fear, free from illusion, free from the cycle of suffering and rebirth. That's why this isn't just a spiritual manual, it's also a philosophical text. It raises huge questions. What is the self? What survives after death? Why do we fear the unknown? And what does it mean to be truly awake? These are questions that thinkers from all over the world have asked. From Socrates to the Buddha, from Nietzsche to Nagarjuna, from modern psychology to ancient meditation traditions. But the Bardo Thodol gives us something rare. It gives us a detailed map of what happens when the ego dissolves. Not just in theory, but in practice. It shows us what happens when the stories we tell ourselves fall apart. In this article, we'll explore the truth of death through the eyes of Tibetan Buddhism, but also through the lens of philosophy. We'll move step by step through the three main bardos. The moment of death, when the mind first separates from the body. The bardo of visions, when powerful images, both beautiful and terrifying, appear. The bardo of becoming, when the consciousness searches for a new form, a new life. At each step, we'll ask, what does this reveal about the mind? About reality? About truth? We'll also compare these teachings to ideas from Western thinkers, like Plato's belief in the soul, Schopenhauer's ideas about desire and suffering, and Heidegger's view that death gives meaning to life. But above all, we'll keep returning to one core insight. The things we fear most at death are the parts of ourselves we refuse to face in life. The Tibetan Book of the Dead tells us that even at the moment of death, even in our confusion, our fear, or our darkness, there is still a chance to wake up. That chance is the light that appears the moment we die, the light that shows us our true nature. But to recognize it, we have to be ready. And that's why this teaching isn't just about what happens after we die, it's about how we live now, how we prepare, how we let go. So as we begin this journey together, keep this in mind. Death doesn't wait until the end of life to shape us. It shapes everything we are right now. And if we can learn to understand it, not run from it, we may find a kind of freedom no one can take away. Let's begin. So if death is is a mirror, and the bardos reflect the shape of our own mind, then we need to ask a deeper question. What exactly are we seeing? And more importantly, who is seeing it? This brings us to one of the central truths hidden inside the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The ego, the sense of I, is an illusion, a powerful one, a deeply convincing one, but still an illusion. At the moment of death, when the body begins to fade, the ego doesn't vanish right away. In fact, it fights to hold on. It panics. It clings to memory, identity, control, anything familiar. But the Bardo Thodol tells us that what we're really holding on to is a dream. A dream of selfhood, built out of thoughts, emotions, roles, and fears. This dream is so convincing that we often don't even question it in life. I am this body. I am this name. I am my success, my failure, my past. But death rips all of that away. And what's left? Just awareness. Raw, open, luminous awareness. That's why the first Bardo, the Chikai Bardo, shows us the clear light. Because that light is our true nature before the ego covers it up again. In this way, death doesn't just end the ego, it exposes it. And here's the twist. The more tightly we've clung to it in life, the more terrifying the process becomes. Because we think we're dying, but it's only the idea of who we were that's falling apart. Now you might wonder, if the ego is an illusion, why is it so painful to lose it? It's because we've built our entire reality around it. Imagine living your whole life inside a house. You decorate the rooms, name the walls, take pride in the structure, but then one day, the house begins to collapse. And you realize it was never real to begin with. It was a projection, a shell, a story you believed. That's what death does to the ego. It reveals that the house we lived in was made of paper. And this isn't just Buddhist philosophy. Thinkers in the West have touched on this too. Take Nietzsche. He wrote about how identity is not fixed, but a mask, something we put on to survive in a world that demands certainty. Or Heidegger, who said that most people live inauthentically, running from death, distracting themselves from truth, until they are forced to confront their own finitude. Even in modern psychology, we see this idea. Carl Jung said that the ego is only a small part of the psyche, that it hides the deeper, more mysterious parts of the self, the shadow, the unconscious, the archetypes. And when we refuse to face those parts, they show up as fear, chaos, even violence. In the bardos, this is exactly what happens. The person who dies is shown not only their ego, but everything they've repressed, everything they feared, everything they ignored. The peaceful and wrathful deities in the second bardo aren't gods or devils in the way most people think. They are symbols, psychological forces, inner truths taking visible form. And whether they appear gentle or terrifying depends on the relationship we had with our own mind during life. Did we face our anger, or did we bury it? Did we cultivate love, or did we hide behind pride? Did we learn to let go, or did we cling to everything? The answers to those questions become visions, not to punish us, but to reflect us. And this leads to a profound teaching. The ego doesn't survive death, but its habits do. The mental patterns we've practiced, attachment, fear, compassion, clarity, these continue to ripple through the bardos. They shape what we see, what we feel, where we go next. This is what Karma Lingpa's text is really telling us. That the self we think we are is a wave on the surface. But the mind, the deep, luminous mind beneath it, is like the ocean. When we die, the wave returns to the ocean. But if we've forgotten that we were ever part of it, the return feels like drowning. And that's why practice matters. Not just meditation, but awareness. Becoming familiar with the mind beneath the ego. learning to watch thoughts rise and fall, letting go of identity just for a moment. Not because we want to die, but because we want to know who we are without the mask. The Bardo Thodol encourages us to do this before death, to prepare, to see through illusion while we're still alive. Because if we can learn to let go now, we won't be terrified of letting go later. This is the truth behind all the imagery in the book. The gods, the demons, the lights, the sounds, they're not meant to distract us. They're meant to wake us up, to show us that everything we fear in death comes from believing in a self that was never real. And everything we long for, freedom, peace, clarity, comes from remembering who we've always been, not the ego, but the awareness behind it, the clear light, the ocean beneath the wave. So when we ask, what is the truth of death? We're also asking, what is the truth of the self? And the answer is the same. What you truly are cannot die. Only the illusion can. Now that we've looked at the ego and how it dissolves at death, it's time to return to something we mentioned earlier, but didn't fully explore. The clear light. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, this is the very first thing a person encounters after dying. Before any visions appear, before any deities or karmic forces rise, there is just this. A brilliant, formless, radiant light. It's not made of fire, it's not a tunnel, it doesn't shine on something, it is the thing. It's described as boundless, timeless, blinding and calm at the same time. But here's the most important part. This light is not something new. It's not a revelation from the outside. It's your true nature. It's the mind in its purest form, before thought, before identity, before form. In Tibetan Buddhism, this is called Rigpa. Rigpa is awareness that sees itself, awareness that doesn't need to grasp or chase or compare. It doesn't cling, it doesn't judge. It simply is, and when we die, that awareness is revealed. Not because it appears for the first Tishunsin, but because everything else falls away. The moment the body shuts down, the senses stop working. The ego begins to dissolve. And for a brief, powerful moment, there is nothing left between us and the clear light. If we recognize it, if we merge with it, we are free, truly free. No more bardos, no more rebirth, just liberation. But, and this is where the Bardo Thodol speaks directly to us, most people miss it. Why? Because the light is too unfamiliar, too intense, too open. We've spent our whole lives identifying with form, with being someone, somewhere, doing something. So when all of that disappears, we panic. The mind grasps for something, anything to hold on to. A thought, a memory, an image. And the moment we do that, we fall away from the clear light. This is called failing to recognize Rigpa. And it's not a failure of intelligence, it's a failure of habit. We've trained our minds to run from openness, to fill space with noise, so when silence comes, we think we're lost, when really we're closer to truth than we've ever been. But even this moment of missing the light isn't a punishment. It's just another mirror. It shows us how ready or unready we were to meet our true nature. This idea isn't only found in Tibetan thought. If we look to other traditions, we find echoes of the clear light everywhere. In Advaita Vedanta, the ultimate reality is called Brahman, a formless, eternal consciousness that lies behind all appearances. The great sage Adi Shankara taught that the self and Brahman are not two, that to know who you really are is to merge with the light of absolute being. In Christian mysticism, Meister Eckhart spoke of the Godhead, a divine ground beyond all names and images. He said that when the soul lets go of everything, even its idea of God, it finds the silent radiance that has always been there. The eye with which I see God, he said, is the same eye with which God sees me. Even in Plotinus, the Neoplatonist philosopher of ancient Greece, we find the idea of the One, a source of all things that is beyond thought, beyond division. To return to the One is not to move somewhere else, it is to return inward, through silence and self-remembrance. So, across cultures, across time, the message is the same. There is a light. It is the truth of who we are. And it can be known, not just after death, but even in life through practice, reflection, and surrender. The Tibetan Book of the Dead offers us a direct path to that light. It tells us that this very moment, this breath, this thought, is shaped by the same awareness that appears after death. And if we learn to recognize it now, we'll be ready to recognize it when it matters most. This is why Tibetan teachings put such a strong emphasis on meditation. Not as escape, but as preparation. When you sit with your thoughts and let them go over and over, you are training to see what's left when the ego falls away. You're learning to rest in the space between moments, the gap between breaths, the silence behind the noise. That's where the light lives. And if you become familiar with it now, it won't feel so foreign later. The clear light is not a prize. It's not a reward. It's your nature. Always here, always waiting. But to see it, you have to stop running. You have to let go. So the next time you close your eyes and feel a moment of stillness, don't rush to fill it. Let it open, let it expand, and ask yourself, who is aware right now? What is this awareness made of? If you follow that question, not with words, but with silence, you might catch a glimpse of the same light that shines at the moment of death. And then, even if everything else falls away, you'll remember who you are. Not the body, not the thoughts, not the name. Just light, just mind, just freedom. Now imagine this. You've died. You saw the clear light, but it passed you by. You couldn't stay in that radiant openness. And now, something else begins. Welcome to the Chonyid Bardo, the Bardo of illusions. This is where the journey becomes vivid, strange, and deeply symbolic. It's not blank, it's not silent, it's a full-blown theatre of the mind. And you are both the audience and the actor. You're watching a show that your own consciousness is projecting, but it doesn't feel like a show. It feels real, more real than anything you've ever known. At first, peaceful deities appear. They are serene, glowing, radiant. They might have many faces, many arms, and hold symbols of wisdom or compassion. In Tibetan tradition, there are 42 of these peaceful beings, each representing a different quality of awakened mind. They appear not to judge you, but to invite you. They offer light, peace, and liberation. But again, here's the twist. If you don't recognize them as your own mind, you become afraid. They seem too intense, too powerful, too unfamiliar. And so the mind recoils, and the moment passes. Next, the wrathful deities appear. These are the fierce ones, terrifying forms with fangs, weapons, wild hair, bloodshot eyes. They scream, they roar, they burn and shake the ground. But just like before, they are not enemies. They are not here to harm you. They are parts of you. They are your fears, your anger, your shadow. The parts you pushed away during life. And now with the body gone, there's nothing to keep them buried. This is one of the most profound truths of the Bardo Thodol. After death, nothing is hidden. The mind becomes a mirror, and everything you've ignored comes rushing out, not to punish you, but to be seen, to be known, to be reintegrated. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, would have called this shadow work. He believed that every human being carries a shadow, a side of the psyche made of repressed thoughts, feelings, and desires. And that true healing comes not from denying the shadow, but from facing it, from understanding it, from integrating it into the whole. In this Bardo, that's exactly what's happening. The peaceful deities represent your potential, your enlightened qualities. The wrathful ones represent your resistance, your fear of facing yourself. And both are illusions. But they're illusions with a purpose. Because in the Bardo, illusion is not just something false, it's something revealing. Every image you see, every sound, every color, every sensation is a reflection of your inner world. This is why the Bardo Thodol calls this stage a mind-made realm. There is no external world here. There is only the energy of consciousness projecting visions onto the space of awareness. It's like a dream, but in this dream, you're fully conscious, and everything depends on how you respond. If you see the deities as yourself, as symbols of your own mind, you can awaken. You can return to the clear light. But if you react with fear or confusion, the visions become more intense. They become distorted. They chase you, not because they're evil, but because they reflect the grasping of the ego. In a way, this entire stage is like a final exam, not a test with right or wrong answers, but a test of recognition. Do you recognize the illusion? Do you see the projection for what it is? Can you stay present with it without fear? If you can, you pass through. If you can't, the projections harden. And slowly the mind begins to crave form again. It wants a body. It wants identity. It wants the comfort of solid ground, even if that means another round of suffering. And this is where the Sidpa Bardo begins, the next and final stage, which we'll get to soon. But before we leave this middle Bardo, let's reflect on what it teaches us about life, not just death. Because the truth is, this theatre of the mind doesn't only play after we die. It's happening right now, in every moment. When you get angry at someone, are you really seeing them? Or are you seeing your projection of them? When you fall in love, are you loving the person, or the story your mind has wrapped around them? When you're afraid, when you're ashamed, when you're proud, how much of that is coming from what's actually in front of you, and how much is coming from inside? The Bardo Thodol tells us that life is also a bardo. We're constantly moving through projections, we're constantly reacting to illusions, and the more we recognize that, the more freedom we have. So you don't have to wait until death to do this work. You can start now. By becoming curious about your reactions, by questioning your assumptions, by asking, is this real, or is this something my mind is creating? And when you start doing that, something shifts. You become less controlled by fear, less driven by craving, more grounded in presence. You start to understand what the deities in the Bardo really are. Not gods, not monsters, but mirrors. And the one looking into them is you. So as we move forward in this journey, into the last Bardo, remember this: the illusions we meet after death are shaped by the illusions we cling to in life. And every illusion, no matter how frightening, holds the potential to wake us up. If we have the courage to see through it, we've reached the final Bardo. The Chikai Bardo revealed the clear light, our true nature. The Chonyid Bardo showed us the illusions of the mind, our hopes, fears, and projections. Now we enter the Sidpa Bardo, the Bardo of becoming. This is where the journey turns toward rebirth, where the mind, having failed to awaken, begins to long for form again. It wants solidity. It wants identity. It wants to be someone, somewhere, doing something, anything, just to escape the uncertainty. In the Sidpa Bardo, desire begins to take hold. The illusions become more subtle, more seductive. Visions of future lives appear, some beautiful, some terrifying, and the mind begins to reach toward them. This is karma in motion, not karma as punishment, but karma as momentum. The mental patterns we've built over a lifetime, our habits, reactions, fears, cravings, all start pulling us toward a new existence. In Tibetan Buddhism, It's said that the type of rebirth we experience depends entirely on the quality of our mind in this bardo. If we're full of fear, clinging and confusion, we may be drawn to lower forms of life. If we're calm, compassionate and aware, we may be drawn to higher realms. But either way, it's still rebirth. It's still within samsara, the cycle of suffering, change and illusion. And this brings us to one of the most important truths in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. The cycle of rebirth isn't controlled by an external judge. It's driven by desire, by the mind's own movement toward what it believes will bring comfort or escape. And in this final bardo, we see it clearly. The text describes something remarkable, that the mind, when it reaches the peak of craving, begins to see scenes of people engaging in sexual union, symbolizing the moment of conception. And if the consciousness is still clinging, if it still wants to grasp form, it rushes toward that vision. And in that moment, rebirth occurs. A new body, a new identity, a new round of joy, suffering, learning, forgetting. The wheel turns again. But even here, there's still hope. Even in the Sidpa Bardo, at the final threshold, there's a chance to wake up. If the person recognizes that the visions are illusions, if they let go of craving, even for a moment, they can still avoid rebirth. They can return to the clear light. They can be free. It's a narrow window, but it's there. And this is perhaps one of the most compassionate aspects of Karma Lingpa's teaching. There is always another chance. The universe doesn't close the door. It keeps opening it again and again, at every stage, in every moment. But freedom requires a shift, not in the world, not in some distant heaven, but in the mind. It requires the ability to stop chasing, to stop clinging, to stop believing that we are incomplete and that some future state will fix that. This is not easy, because desire is powerful. It's not just about craving pleasures. It's about craving identity, craving control, craving the feeling of being someone. This is why the Sidpa Bardo is so important, not just after death, but in everyday life, because we live in it all the time. Think about it. How often do you feel like you need something else, some achievement, some relationship, some experience to be whole? How often does your mind reach toward the next thing, the next distraction, the next comfort, the next version of yourself? This is the Sidpa Bardo in action. It's not just a state after death, it's a mental habit, a cycle, and the only way out is awareness. To see the craving for what it is, to feel the pull and not follow it. To rest, even for a moment, in the space between wanting and having. Because in that space, there's freedom. Western philosophers have touched on this too. Schopenhauer said that the essence of life is will, a restless, endless striving that never finds satisfaction. To him, the path to peace was the quieting of the will, the cessation of craving. Spinoza spoke of conatus, the inner drive of every being to persist, to continue, to expand itself. But he also believed that true joy comes when we understand that this drive can be guided, not by impulse, but by reason and insight. The Bardo Thodol would agree, desire is not evil, it's natural. But if it's unconscious, it leads to suffering. If it's seen clearly, it can be transformed. And this is the final challenge of the Sidpa Bardo. Can you see desire arise and not follow it? Can you witness the pull toward rebirth and choose stillness instead? If so, you are free. Not because you've escaped the world, but because you've escaped the illusion that you need something from it. So here, at the end of the journey, the teaching becomes simple. You don't need to run. You don't need to cling. You don't need to become anything. You only need to see clearly. Because the truth of death, the real, deep truth, is that what dies was never who you were. And what is reborn is only what you refuse to release. We've walked through all three bardos now. We've seen the radiant light of awareness, the illusions of the mind, and the craving that pulls us into rebirth. But now we arrive at a deeper question, one that lingers beneath everything we've explored so far. What is real in all of this? Are the bardos actual places? Do we really encounter gods and demons after death? Or are these just metaphors, symbols for inner experiences wrapped in sacred language? The Tibetan Book of the Dead never answers this question in a fixed way. And maybe that's the point. Because the real teaching doesn't come from taking the images literally. It comes from understanding what they reveal about the mind. Let's look closer. The deities, the peaceful ones, the wrathful ones, they aren't external beings waiting for you on the other side. They're not standing by to judge or punish or reward. They're mirrors. They're reflections of you, of your habits, your beliefs, your hidden truths. And the light, the clear light of death, it's not a spotlight shining down from heaven. It's the light that shines through you when the noise is gone and the mind is still. The bardos aren't places on a map. They are states of consciousness, states that we move through, not just after death, but every day. When you fall asleep, when you dream, when you meditate, when you wake up startled in the middle of the night, you're passing through bardos. When your identity breaks down in a crisis, when you go through heartbreak, when you leave one phase of life and step into another, you are in a bardo. These teachings are not about the afterlife in some distant sense. They are about now, about how the mind works, about how we suffer and how we can wake up. So what's real? Is the experience of death a journey through outer realms? Or is it an inward journey, through layers of self, illusion, and finally, freedom? Maybe it's both. Or maybe the difference doesn't matter, because what the Bardo Thodol is pointing us toward isn't facts, it's recognition. Recognition of our own mind, recognition of what we've been running from, and most of all, recognition of Rigpa, our true nature. And that nature is not born and does not die. It's the one thing that remains through every bardo, through every illusion, through every fear. It is awareness itself, clear, open, unchanging. So when people ask, what's the truth of death? The answer isn't a place. It isn't a vision. It isn't a final judgment. It's this. The truth of death is that everything we thought we were falls away. And what remains is what was always real. This is the heart of non-duality in Tibetan thought. The idea that the separation between self and world, between life and death, between subject and object, is an illusion. There's no you that travels through the bardos. There's just awareness, watching, reacting, learning. And in that awareness, there is no birth and no death, only experience, only unfolding, only clarity or confusion. From this perspective, the teachings of the Bardo Thodol are not just spiritual, they are philosophical in the deepest sense. They ask us to question the very foundations of what we believe to be real. Am I this body, this mind, this story? If I can watch my thoughts come and go, then I am not my thoughts. If I can observe fear, then I am not fear. If I can see the ego dissolve at death, then I was never the ego to begin with. So what am I? This question doesn't have an answer in words. It can only be realized in silence, in stillness, in direct experience. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead gives us a guide. It doesn't give us answers. It gives us pointers. Pointers that say, look here, pay attention now. Notice what you cling to, notice what you fear, and notice the awareness behind all of it. That's what's real. Everything else is passing. This is why the bardos offer liberation at every stage, because the truth is never gone. It's just obscured by fear, by habit, by illusion. But once you recognize it, even for a moment, you can't unsee it. And that moment of recognition is freedom. It doesn't matter if it happens after death, or in the middle of an ordinary day, or in the quiet of meditation. What matters is that it happens. Because once you know what's real, you stop chasing what's not. You stop fearing the end. You stop clinging to beginnings. And you begin to live, not as a name, a role, or a story, but as the light that shines through it all. So the truth of death is not something distant or dark. It's not a secret hidden in another world. It's the same truth that was here all along. The truth that what you truly are has never been born and cannot die. Now, you might be wondering, what does any of this have to do with us, with our world right now? We're living in a time of science, technology, and fast answers. Most people don't spend their days thinking about death until it suddenly arrives, unexpected and raw. So how can a 14th century Tibetan text filled with deities, bardos, and spiritual visions still matter today? The answer is simple: because death hasn't changed. No matter how modern the world becomes, no matter how many medical advancements we make, no one escapes it. And more than that, no one escapes the fear of it. Even if we don't talk about it, we carry that fear with us. It shows up in anxiety, in denial, in our desperate search for meaning. We chase distractions, achievements, relationships, anything to avoid sitting in silence with the fact that life is temporary. But the Tibetan Book of the Dead doesn't avoid death. It turns directly toward it. It says, look. Here is what happens, here is what it means, and here is how you can prepare, not with superstition, not with dogma, but with awareness, with practice, with the courage to let go of what is false and recognize what is real. This is why the Bardo Thodol has found new life in the modern world. Hospice workers, palliative care experts, spiritual teachers, and even some scientists are turning to it, not for its imagery, but for its insight. Because it doesn't just describe what happens after death, it teaches us how to live with death in mind. And that changes everything. It changes how we see our relationships. It changes how we respond to fear. It changes how we deal with suffering, with aging, with loss. Even in fields like psychology and psychedelics, the core message of the bardos is being rediscovered. That the mind creates worlds. That deep transformation happens when we let go of control. And that healing often comes not from avoiding death, but from understanding it. This teaching isn't just spiritual, it's deeply human. It tells us that the things we fear most, the loss of identity, the pain of change, the unknown, are actually gateways. They are invitations to wake up. And in a world that's constantly pulling our attention outward, this kind of inner teaching is rare. So yes, the Tibetan Book of the Dead is ancient, but its message is timeless. Because every day we are moving through bardos, moments of uncertainty, transition, loss, and renewal. And every day we have the same choice it offers the dying: cling to illusion, or recognize truth. So what is the truth of death? Is it the end of everything? Or the beginning of something deeper? If the Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches us anything, it's this: death is not the enemy. Illusion is. And the real tragedy isn't that we die, but that we live without ever waking up. Throughout the bardos, again and again, we're offered a choice. Not a choice between life and death, but between awareness and confusion. Between clinging and letting go. Between being lost in the dream or realizing we are the dreamer. And that choice isn't just for the moment we die, it's for right now. Because what the Bardo Thodol is really pointing toward is a different kind of death. Not the death of the body, but the death of illusion, the death of the false self, the death of the ego that says, this is me, I am this body, I am this name, I am this story. To die before you die means to let go of that, to see through it, to recognize that what you truly are is not bound by form, not defined by thoughts, not limited by birth or death. It means to live with your eyes open, to walk through the bardos of life, the heartbreaks, the changes, the endings, with awareness, with grace, with a mind that knows how to return to stillness no matter what arises. This is liberation, not in some faraway world, not after 100 lifetimes, but here, now, in this breath. And maybe when the moment of physical death does come, it won't be so frightening, because we'll recognize the light, because we've seen it before, because we never forgot who we were. So if you've made it this far, through all the bardos, through the mirrors and illusions, take a moment now, take a breath, feel the awareness behind the breath, the silence behind the thoughts. That is the truth of death. And that is the freedom that waits on the other side of fear. Not in the next life, not at the end, but here. In the one moment that's always been real, this one.